In 1971, an American airline had just taken off when a passenger sitting in the back row called the flight attendant over with a smile and handed her a note. That note contained only a few words, but it sent shockwaves across America. Who was that passenger, and why has the FBI to this day failed to find him, dead or alive? It wasn't just that the FBI couldn't find him, but that the most powerful intelligence agency in the U.S. hasn't uncovered even a shred of new information on this passenger in over 50 years. This intriguing incident began on November 24, 1971, Portland Airport. A man, who appeared to be a businessman, booked a flight from Portland to Seattle and headed straight for the plane. Back then, domestic flights in the U.S. had no security measures, no luggage checks or ID verifications. The flight was Northwest Orient Airlines, a Boeing 727. Set to cover the distance between Portland and Seattle in just 45 minutes. Wearing sunglasses and carrying a briefcase, the passenger, who had booked under the name Dan Cooper, boarded the plane and selected his seat in the back row. He ordered a drink and lit a cigarette, both perfectly normal in the 70s since smoking was allowed on flights. At exactly 2:58 p.m. the flight took off. Cooper turned around and handed a note to the flight attendant sitting near him, a woman named Florence Schaffner. As soon as she read the note, it was as though the ground beneath her had vanished. "I have a bomb, and I want you to sit beside me." When Florence sat beside him, Cooper opened his briefcase, revealing 8 sticks of dynamite and a detonator. In short, the plane had been hijacked, and Dan Cooper had 3 demands: $200,000 in cash by $5 p.m., 2 pairs of parachutes, and a refueling truck ready at Seattle Airport. He indirectly warned Florence that any mistake would result in the bomb being detonated. There were 35 other passengers on board, completely unaware of what was happening in the back of the plane. Florence relayed Cooper's demands to the cockpit, informing the captain of the dire situation. Another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, took over, sitting with Cooper and relaying messages between him and the pilot. This was the first ever plane hijacking in U.S. history for ransom, and that's why both local authorities and the FBI agreed to meet all of the hijackers' demands. They assumed Cooper wouldn't get very far. The flight, which was supposed to land in Seattle in just 45 minutes, circled the airport for the next 90 minutes, all while the unaware passengers were told that a technical difficulty was delaying the landing. During that time, $200,000 in $20 bills were collected from Seattle National Bank, with the serial numbers noted. Additionally, 2 pairs of parachutes were arranged from a nearby skydiving club. At 5:45 p.m. the plane finally landed, and as promised, Dan Cooper was handed a bag filled with cash and 2 pairs of parachutes. The plane was also refueled. Once his demands were met, Cooper allowed all 35 passengers and 2 crew members to leave the plane, but he ordered the pilots and 2 flight attendants to stay on board. Night had fallen by this time, and the plane took off again. Through Tina Mucklow, Cooper sent specific instructions to the pilot. Keep the landing gear and flaps open, maintain an altitude of 10,000 feet, and fly at a speed of 320 kilometers per hour, heading straight to Mexico City. The pilot complied with most of the demands, but informed Cooper that flying directly to Mexico City wasn't feasible due to fuel constraints. He offered 2 options for refueling: Reno or Phoenix. Cooper agreed to refuel in Reno. Meanwhile, local and federal authorities continued their efforts, deploying 2 fighter jets to trail the hijacked plane. Although they struggled to maintain the plane's slow speed, the jets began circling the aircraft instead. Under the cover of darkness, the plane headed toward Reno. Cooper instructed Tina to go into the cockpit, where the two pilots and another flight attendant were already located. As Tina turned to close the cockpit door, she caught a final glimpse of Dan Cooper strapping something to his back. Moments later, the rear stairs opened and Cooper jumped from the plane. What happened next has puzzled investigators for over 50 years.
A double thief called D.B. Cooper.
D.B. Cooper.
3 hours later, the plane landed in Reno, where it was thoroughly searched. Neither Dan Cooper nor the bomb was found. Not only did Cooper disappear from the plane, but he vanished from the world altogether. No trace of him has ever been found, dead or alive. Who was Dan Cooper, and how did he manage to escape the watchful eyes of the entire U.S.? This is one of the FBI's longest-running cases, one that remains open to this day. While no one actually saw Dan Cooper jump from the plane, the fact that the rear staircase was left open made it clear that he had exited somewhere between Seattle and Reno. The FBI began searching for evidence on the plane, but all they found were Cooper's clip-on tie, 8 cigarette butts, and one of the 2 parachutes he had left behind. Even more frustrating for investigators, no one had a photograph of Cooper. After interviewing the passengers and crew, a sketch was made based on Cooper's appearance. Before beginning their search between Seattle and Reno, the FBI first needed to pinpoint where Cooper had jumped from. This wasn't too difficult, as the plane had been on autopilot, meaning its exact flight path was recorded. Based on the aircraft's speed and altitude, along with the time the rear staircase was deployed, 8:10 p.m. authorities estimated Cooper's drop zone and defined a 45 square kilometer search area of dense forests and rugged mountains. Search teams scoured the area from the air and the ground, but no briefcase, no money, and no Cooper were ever found. The area was so cold and harsh that everyone assumed Cooper had likely perished. However, what happened next shocked even the FBI. For the first time in American history, the FBI sought help from the public, publishing Cooper's sketch and the serial numbers of the $200,000 ransom money in newspapers. They also offered a reward for any information. Authorities believed that if Cooper were alive, he would eventually spend the money. But astonishingly, not a single one of those marked bills ever surfaced again. 9 years later, in 1980, something remarkable happened. On a beach along the Columbia River in southern Washington, known as Tena Bar, a boy playing with his parents found 3 bundles of cash. The bundles, containing $5,800 in $20 bills, were waterlogged but intact. The boy's parents brought the money to the FBI, and the serial numbers matched the ones from Cooper's ransom. This was the first major break in the case in 9 years, but rather than solving the mystery, it only deepened it. The money was found 27 kilometers away from Cooper's suspected drop zone. Initially, it was thought that the bills might have fallen into the Lewis River at the drop zone and floated down to the Columbia River. But upon further examination, investigators realized that the Columbia River flows in the opposite direction, making it impossible for the bills to have drifted there naturally. The mystery only grew more complex for the FBI. Even more baffling, the beach where the money was found had undergone excavation work in 1974, 3 years after the hijacking. The bundles of cash were found buried in the sand that had been added during this excavation. This new evidence suggested that either Dan Cooper or an accomplice had intentionally buried the money on Tena Bar Beach to confuse investigators. The FBI continued investigating people who resembled Cooper, but no substantial leads ever materialized. Some theories suggest Cooper may have been a trained military commando, as the parachute he took with him was a military-grade chute, far more difficult to operate than the one he left behind on the plane. Apart from the $5,800 found in 1980, none of the remaining 9,710 bills ever reappeared. In terms of evidence, all the FBI has is Cooper's sketch, the airline ticket he filled out himself, and the clip-on tie, which was fastened on the left side, indicating that Cooper was left-handed. This case has left the FBI puzzled for over 50 years. Even today, all the details of the case remain available on the FBI's website, and the file remains open. Don't forget to like and share this video, and thanks so much for your lovely comments. See you in the next exciting video.